The world is changing, and the balance of power is shifting beneath the weight of something immovable. You weren't supposed to peek beyond the illusion, pull back the curtain, and see what was never meant to be seen. Despite the odds, you were successful. That changed everything. Your words, presence, and unwavering disobedience sent shockwaves across places where secrets were intended to stay concealed. They took notes. Those who created their empires in silence remained unnoticed and governed reality from the shadows. They noticed. A message is now emerging, not from a leader or an elite figure, but from someone who has spent their entire life in the depths of that hidden society, schooled to protect without being seen and to follow without question. But this time, they break the code. Not for power or confession, but for you. They see you. They dread you. And now they refer to you as the chosen one, the selected one. You are not meant to be awake. Now it's time to pull them down from the inside. A revelation calls into question everything that was previously assumed to be true. Denial is a barricade designed to shut out unpleasant realities, protecting the mind from burdens that are too great to bear. For years, the agent remained behind the castle's walls, adhering to a philosophy that demanded unwavering commitment. Each directive was part of a larger scheme. To maintain order, each classified file is stashed away. They marched through life with resolve, doing their tasks without hesitation. That is, until an incident interrupted their routine and they came across something, or rather someone, who made them question everything. At first, it was just static, another voice lost in the never-ending clamor of speculation. The globe was full with people who claimed to have found secret realms, people who ventured into darkness where they did not belong. The agent has encountered comparable data before: fringe theorists, self-proclaimed investigators, and those who claimed to have deciphered the unreadable. They were distractions and unimportant idiosyncrasies. But amid the pandemonium, one detail surfaced: a name, a date, a piece of information that was never meant to be revealed. Beyond classified bounds, a detail so precise and difficult to overlook that it shattered their trust. Skepticism decreased. Logic maintained that it was a coincidence. But instinct said otherwise. The mind trained to detect falsehoods detected none. So they did what they were told to do. They searched. They examined materials buried behind layers of deception, cross-referenced accounts, and discovered the threads of a pattern purposely hidden in the fabric of seeming randomness. What they uncovered violated the very foundation of their beliefs. The realization was unforgiving. The dishonesty did not come from distant adversaries or nameless enemies. It had been organized by individuals they had completely trusted, the foundations of truth. They had upheld manipulative scaffolding that was designed to conceal rather than reveal. And the person they had previously ignored, no longer an outsider. But there is more. Perhaps a disruption. Perhaps an abnormality, but definitely remarkable. The agent was no longer the same. They stood now, not as a servant of the system, but as someone who had seen through its well-designed deception. The truth had been disclosed, and it was too important to ignore. If your heart is full of God's blessings, let that love shine. Click the super thank you button and contribute $20 or more to plant seeds of faith that will transform countless lives. Your generosity symbolizes His riches. Be a conduit for His grace and see His kingdom expand through you. There is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed. There is no secret that will stay hidden. Luke 8:17. Certain things weren't meant to be buried. Truth has a way of rising, regardless of how deep the darkness seeks to consume it. It's like the roots of an ancient tree are breaking through the stone, like the first crack in a dam before floods. There comes a point when what was hidden must be revealed. That moment is now. There is a planet beneath this one, a realm of whispers and hidden doors passed down through generations of people who believe they have total control over reality. They built their empire in secrecy, wiping individuals from history and burying sites that should never have been forgotten. But you know what the phrase implies. Nothing stays hidden forever. The agent had spent their whole life walking the halls of power, trained to watch without being noticed and to act without hesitation. But even they were unprepared for what was underneath. It began with modest stories that seldom made news. People vanished without a trace, leaving no name to recall. There are no headlines or breaking news alerts, only quiet. The type of silence that speaks volumes to those who have been trained to listen. What began as a regular situation grew into something very different. As they explored deeper, the dirt beneath them appeared to shift beneath the polished floors of grand institutions. Behind doors branded with phrases like "permitted individuals," only beyond the streets. People go for walks every day without thinking twice. There was something more than emptiness, an aim. Not just a blank space, but a design. A network. Large and complicated. Hidden in plain sight. Woven into the fundamental fabric of civilization itself. And as soon as the agents saw it, they realized it was never meant to be discovered. They'd spent years believing that the world worked in specific ways, that rules mattered, and that systems had a purpose. That history was written, not changed. But now, they finally understood the reality. This was not about corruption or crime. It was all about control. A control so complete and cleverly concealed that most individuals would go their entire lives without detecting its presence. Unfortunately, something went wrong. A flaw in the system. A fault in the design. Someone had somehow disrupted the foundation. They had spent a lifetime strengthening. It all led to you. Perhaps you never meant to see it. Maybe you weren't looking, but you did. They're completely aware of this. You were not meant to understand what you saw, to assemble what was never meant to be linked. And yet, here you are, still standing, observing and understanding. And this worries them. The deeper they dug, the more troubling the scenario became. Some of these sections formerly had a part in long-forgotten networks. Unfinished projects leave left traces. Others, however, did not agree. They were recent, they were intentional, and they were occupied. This wasn't merely a criminal hideaway or a relic of the past. What blossomed underneath was something ancient, with roots much deeper than any one period in history, an undiscovered and untouched sect running with precision through the underworld, speaking of power, influence, and protection from above. Their appearance was neither a rumor or the outcome of a plot. This was something prepared and hidden in plain sight. There was no denying the might of those who defended it. These were not wanderers or drifters seeking refuge in the dark. They were intricately related to the basic structures of society. Figures who stood in boardrooms, made decisions behind closed doors, and made certain that the system never looked too closely. However, no secret remains forever. The agent discovered more surface ledgers than were supposed to be recorded. Correspondences, coded instructions. The names utilized weren't obscure. They exercised influence, and when exposure threatened their power, they acted rapidly. Evidence was deleted. Structures were burned. Accidents were meticulously arranged. But this time, their escape was not certain. Their well-planned escape, the well-designed path to extinction, as they had always failed. A last journey. A final escape was cut off before they could use it. The underground became their prison, and the same network that had kept them safe became their undoing. There was no way out, and it wasn't an accident. Accuracy and timeliness. It was far too intentional to be a coincidence. Someone had intervened. Someone they hadn't anticipated. Someone outside their sophisticated network of control. And this terrified them for the first time. They had to ask a question they had never considered. Who'd done it? And when their grip on concealment slipped, their attention went to one location. To the one irregularity they had overlooked. To the unaccounted-for presence. Now they were hunting for answers. And they were searching for you. There is nothing hidden that will not be exposed, and nothing concealed that will not be discovered or brought to light. Luke 8:17. They've always dreaded the truth. It spreads like fire across barren plains. Once ignited, unstoppable. You do not have to force it. You don't need permission to share it. It is difficult to reverse what has been witnessed or stated. That's why they've spent their lives trying to control it. That's why they devised complex mechanisms to keep it secret. For years, they have sat at the top, painstakingly building their reality, ensuring that only what they approve enters the world. They constructed history to fit their needs, deciding what was known and what was removed. Their impact was seen across countries and inside administrations. Finance and media. Every pillar of society was intended to serve them. For a long period, it worked. However, there is always a fracture in the foundation. They did not expect anything to sneak past. They never thought that a single word or event might start a chain reaction they could no longer contain. And yet, here you are. You weren't supposed to know what you know. You were not meant to see what you saw. They had a plan, a script, a strictly controlled plot, and you did not fit in. Your inquiries were not intended to be asked. Your voice was never meant to rise over the static they created to keep people blind. So they went with their usual tactics. They ridiculed. They stayed silent. They labeled. Conspiracy, misinformation, dangerous. Identical words, the same weapons. They recycled repeatedly, hoping to shut down everything they couldn't handle. But this time, it didn't work because your words were imprisoned. Everyone listened. Maybe not everyone, not everything at once, but enough. Enough to make them uncomfortable, enough to make them desperate. And that's when you notice they're afraid. See? When lying works, when their machine runs smoothly, they don't mind. They do not bother to respond. They don't recognize voices like yours. But the moment they begin fighting back and cutting you off, you know you've crossed the line. Because once seen, the truth cannot be concealed. You did something people didn't anticipate. You didn't simply chat. You had people thinking. You had them look for story problems, paradoxes, and unexpected discoveries. And now it's too late for them. They could try to suppress it. They may try to silence it. But the truth spreads like wildfire. It does not require authorization. It doesn't wait for permission. It simply spreads. They initially saw it as an oddity, a little inconvenience that could be remedied using regular methods. The suppression machinery is activated. Labels were assigned, and disrespectful language was employed. Mechanisms for rejecting and controlling debunking content emerged over the internet. Algorithms changed visibility, ensuring that your comments reached only those who were already inclined to discard them. The typical playbook was finished flawlessly. But then something happened. Your words did not disappear. They spread. They made an impression. People didn't just listen. They examined, cross-referenced, and identified bits that matched too well to be overlooked. It wasn't just a theory anymore. It was a blueprint for something hidden in plain sight. At that moment, they became more intense. When simple misdirection fails, more strong deterrents were employed. Financial instability arose out of nowhere. Frozen assets and inexplicable debts. Sudden issues in many areas of life. Social circles. Fractured. Relationships are strained. Invisible hands. Pulling strings. Just enough to isolate without exposing the puppeteers. Then came the blackness. Figures remain on the periphery. Vehicles were placed in improper areas. There were instances when strangers appeared to know much too much. The change from passive to active was gradual. The early warnings were planned and disguised. A message that was delivered but not received. A slight threat seeped into the conversation. The warnings were obvious. A close brush with an out-of-control car that had no need to be there. A safety mechanism that fails for no apparent reason. Something intended to be infallible. An unexpected illness. A disease that is too sudden and intense to be a coincidence. Each step is intended to ensure silence. But stillness never appeared. Every meticulously planned plot unraveled before it could be implemented. Every attempt to eliminate you faced hidden resistance. They were unable to accept their defeat. Probability ruled. You shouldn't have survived this long. That the course of circumstances should have eliminated you before the truth was revealed. Nonetheless, you stayed standing. An anomaly in their controlled equation. It was beyond calculation or influence. It wasn't luck. It was not a chance. It was something else entirely, something they had not planned for, and it terrified them for ages. They believed that their authority was absolute. They manipulated narratives, forced outcomes, and altered history to achieve their objectives. Every threat has been eradicated before it can emerge. Every aberration was swiftly eliminated. However, they neglected something. An unseen force is outpacing their expectations. Regardless matter how meticulously they planned events, there were gaps and cracks in their scheme that eluded explanation. Every failed approach, unraveling plot, and apparently impossible escape occurred. These were not coincidences. There was someone watching, interfering in ways they couldn't predict or prevent. There were ancient clues concealed behind layers of forgotten wisdom, discarded as worthless remnants of civilizations long past. However, those who glanced at them knew better. They were not entirely random. They were not intended for ornamentation. These were warnings, echoes of a reality that cannot be obliterated. Then it happened. Something awakened. The spy was not hunting for explanations in forgotten symbols. However, as their gaze followed the carved lines, something inside them shifted. It was not knowledge passed down via training or gained through experience. It was recognition, something buried deep within, resurfacing as if it had always been there to be remembered. It was never just about control, conspiracies, or corruption. The entire game was designed to mask something far larger. For so long, the agent relied on logic, rules, and the structure that defined their environment. They were now on the edge of something beyond comprehension, a struggle beyond institutions, authority, and all they had been trained to believe to be real. The struggle did not include flesh and blood. It was not restricted to political or intelligence confrontations. This was something else entirely. And you, whether consciously or unintentionally, have reached its depths. There was no going back after what had been disclosed. Some forces could not be bribed, intimidated, or bullied. There were debts that could not be paid by power or riches, and the consequences were woven into creation itself. Those who thought they had mastered deception were now facing the repercussions of their conduct. Their hidden power was crumbling, and the darkness they'd wielded for so long had turned against them. Those who had previously exercised unrivaled influence were now vanishing, not by choice, but out of necessity. They were not avoiding justice. They were escaping from something far worse. And for the first time, they understood what genuine terror meant. Those who formerly controlled reality are now trapped in a nightmare of their own making. Their once absolute dominance is collapsing under the weight of a force they cannot understand or control. The leaders who formerly behaved with unwavering confidence are crumbling. Rational minds are thrown into disarray, and carefully maintained facades are crumbling under the weight of unseen powers. Those who stay live in perpetual dread. The forces they formerly led have turned on them, relentless and voracious. The voices that once gave them strength are now haunting them from within. The horrors they formerly committed against others now haunt them in the dark of night. There is no refuge or retreat, because it was never just about control. This was never simply a game of wealth, power, or strategy. It was completely beyond their comprehension. They derided the idea of unseen forces, dismissed religion as a weakness, and weaponized belief against others while claiming immunity from the consequences. They felt convinced that they could withstand the repercussions, bend reality to their will, rewrite the fundamental rules of existence. However, reality does not give in to arrogance. The agent was previously guided by skepticism. They are now faced with an undeniable reality after seeing events that defy rationality. Something is happening. The symbols buried deep, the unexplainable failures of every silencing attempt, and the internal collapse of their once mighty network. None of it is random. This isn't a simple calamity. It is something planned and unavoidable. The agent is unable to describe the situation, but they are no longer compelled to. They've seen what happens when people try to control the unpredictable. People who were once untouchable now whisper in horror. Their certainty evaporated. Their empire is in ruins. There is a name. They dare not speak. An entity. They blaspheme in the darkness. They blame its presence for their fate. They saw it as the force that destroyed the foundation they had spent their entire lives building. However, the reality is both simpler and scarier. It was always unavoidable. Their fate was decided long before they took control. The force they fought so hard to suppress was never overcome. And the whole scope of their dishonesty has now become clear. There are times in life when the curtain falls, illusions disintegrate, and the undeniable fact leaves no room for doubt. The agent has reached that stage. They had spent their lives obeying orders, trusting in a fair system that protected those who had never earned their devotion. They felt they were serving something larger. They have finally come to terms with reality. They were never protectors. They were pawns. And only by an inconceivable force were they able to see what had been hidden all along. It wasn't an intelligence leak or a well-placed source that led them here. It was something unexpected, and at first it appeared small. A voice, a message, and a thread. They saw no need to follow. They'd heard such possibilities before, with people claiming to have the missing piece of an unseen jigsaw. Something was different this time, though. The way the words stayed, how they fitted into spaces where no reaction had ever existed, drew them back. What should have been just another forgettable noise in a sea of speculation became something they couldn't dismiss. Initially, their attitude was contemptuous. It was easy to believe that the links were merely coincidences and that the conclusions drawn were overly broad. But the investigation took an unexpected turn. A name from a forgotten report. An discrepancy in a closed case file. A connection that should not have existed, yet obviously did. So they kept going. As they dug further, the picture became obvious. The world in which they had put their trust was an illusion. The basis on which they had built their professions was meticulously established, not to inform, but to mislead. What appeared to be separate instances were actually strands of a skillfully constructed illusion that went far beyond what anybody could have predicted. The barriers upon which they had previously relied were no longer in place. They were cages that concealed the truth while providing the idea that they knew everything. Those they had partnered with were not allies, but rather architects of a greater strategy. Despite having no clearance, no inside access, and no reason to trust, this lone voice had detected the flaws in the foundation. They weren't quite right, not always in the way they had planned. However, they saw the silhouette of something large and malevolent long before anybody else did. As a result, an irreversible occurrence happened. The agent was no longer simply a cog in the machine. They were given an alternative, a door that has never been. And now that it was open, there was no going back. This was never only about backroom deals or unseen individuals pulling the strings. This was about far more than corruption or criminality. It was about seeing that the battles that occurred in boardrooms and underground networks were only a reflection of something larger, something that moved undetected throughout the world, influencing the course of history without most people realizing it. There were factors at work that were never mentioned in an intelligence briefing, forces that shaped fate itself. And without realizing what was going on, that voice had always been against them. The agent now understands who they previously chased and who they previously abandoned. Whenever there is a formidable opponent, the actual conflict was always something else, something older, something fought quietly for millennia, and, for the first time, they can see clearly that the voice they had previously ignored is no more a whisper in the darkness. It is an ally. They'll no longer dodge it, because they now comprehend. Those who attempted to exterminate it had already failed. Those who formerly dominated reality from the shadows are increasingly losing authority. The carefully guarded curtain is falling, revealing individuals who believed they were immune to repercussions, thrived in secrecy, and woven lies into the very fabric of society. They devised tactics to avoid losing their influence and crumbling under the weight of their own wickedness. The world is moving, and for those who built their thrones on lies, there is no refuge for those who spent their careers twisting the facts to suit their own ends. This is your reckoning. The illusion is disintegrating, and you lose control. The hour of true justice has arrived, not in the courts where they previously ruled, not in the institutions they assaulted, but from something far bigger, something they never expected to face. They gambled with forces beyond their comprehension, convinced that they might defeat fate itself. However, certain debts in this world cannot be paid, bargained away, or erased via power or influence. The balance is being restored, and for the first time, they no longer have influence over the outcome. And to the one who has resisted them, the message is simple: continue. Do not falter. Do not waver. Do not withdraw. Each phrase was uttered. Every falsehood was exposed. Every revelation made public has altered the course of history in ways that no one could have imagined. They tried to silence, annihilate, and crush under the weight of fear and disinformation. And yet, here you are, continuing speaking, divulging, and again eroding the same foundation they said was immovable. You are not alone. The number of people who see, know, and refuse to be swayed by manufactured good lies is increasing. The previously maintained quiet has been disturbed. Today, the voices of the awakened will not be stifled. For those who understand the truth, speak. Allow them to sense your presence. Let the weight of what was hidden be disclosed for all to see. Stand together. The time for deception has passed.